Okay, we're going to start, and I hope either when people come and they go into the waiting room, I'll let them in for a while. But after a while, I have to continue. Otherwise, I lose my concentration. Okay. So welcome to you all, and I'm here just to introduce myself and also to introduce you. So first, I'm going to give a presentation about who I am, and also talk about what I've been doing here in Germany the last 25 years. For some people know this already, but I'm still doing it because I'm recording this and we'll put it online later for people who couldn't take part live because of whatever reason. My name is Paul Scorpin, and in my passport it still says I'm an American, but I've been away from the States for about 35 years now. And I've been living in Germany now for the last 25 years. Somebody just came to the waiting room. Before that time, I was living on the island of Cyprus. And the reason that I was on the island of Cyprus was there was a great healer and mystic. His name was Daskalos. And I made it to him. And the reason why I was attracted to him was because when I was at the University of Maine in Orono, they don't call it that anymore, I started taking courses from a professor called Kyriakos Markides. This is in German. And Markides is a Cypriot who started to write books about Daskalos in the middle of the 80s and late 80s and into the 90s. And I started attending all the courses from him because I got very interested in sociology, and he was a professor of sociology. And sociology helped me find my way into the world, because like a lot of young people, I was quite confused about what I was going to do professionally or even with my life. And that opened the door indirectly to a 2-year stay in Kathmandu with the University of Wisconsin, studying shamanism and Buddhism and Hinduism, which in retrospect prepared me perfectly for a 7-year stay on the island of Cyprus and a 6-year time period where I worked with Daskalos every day. It's hard to describe my relationship with Daskalos. I have a picture here hanging here. This is from about 30 years ago. I was a bit younger then. Yeah, this is Governor's Beach. And in any case, it's hard for me to explain my relationship with Daskalos because some people call me his assistant because I traveled everywhere with him and took care of the travel arrangements, but we became actually very close friends. And I had the great privilege and the great honor and the great fortune of actually being with him all the waking hours and watching him heal, and also receiving a lot of private instruction from him, a lot. Then he had a major stroke in 1994, June 1994. I was there. And he was left paralyzed and speechless for 14 months before he passed over. Somebody else is coming in. Like I said, for the 10 minutes, I'm going to let people in, and then I'm going to have to stop because I'm getting a little bit sentimental at my age, and every time I think about Daskalos, it still seems like it was yesterday that I was out on the island, even though it was 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I was in the middle of my stay in Cyprus. And it's a funny thing with Daskalos because he was such a beautiful man.
Hello?
Sorry? Can you please turn your mics off or just stay quiet? Otherwise, we're going to hear everybody in the background. As long as you're quiet, it's fine. But if you've got a lot of stuff going on in your living room or your dining room, please turn your mics off just for the presentation period. All right, so yeah, just to be with Daskalos, I mean, apart from the fact that he was an incredible healer, and also really the model of somebody who has reached the Christ consciousness, and a terribly loving man, and also a very good friend. after he passed over, I stayed in Cyprus because there were some books that weren't finished and there were some things to tie up. But in the meantime, I came together with my future wife, Brigitte, who's a German woman. And she was spending a lot of time with me in Cyprus. And she was an actress then, like our daughter is now in LA. And she said, Paul, if you want to have a future with me, you have to come to Munich because I need to be reachable for my agent in case a job comes up. And I can't live in Cyprus because it would take me too long to come and I would lose the role. So I said, fine, it's time to move on from Cyprus, and pretty much everything was, all the loose ends were tied up. And it was the end of a 7-year stay. And then when I reached Munich, Duskless was fairly well known here in Germany, actually quite well known, because Marquitti's books became bestsellers in the German language. And people knew that I worked closely with Duskless, so they started to call me up and they said, you know, Paul, we know that you were a close student of Duskless. Can you heal like he can heal? And I just said, no, honestly, I can't, because Duskless was a miracle worker. But still, they said, can you please try, because I'm not doing well physically or emotionally. And so people started to come to me for treatments. And Duskless as a healer was relatively formless. First of all, he had so many people there for healings. We actually instituted a healing day on Thursday where I made a list of 30 people who would be treated in the Stoa. The Stoa is the room where he taught. And they were mostly Germans or Austrians or Swiss, or some Americans as well. And I would write down their names and then call them up. And then Duskless would do basically a healing that took about 5 minutes. And it was impressive. I mean, just to see this, you know, and it worked, you know. And Duskless would always say to me after the first few months that I was there, he said, Paul, now you have to come forward and help us. Because you've seen enough and you've heard enough. And I just said to Duskless, you know, I'm intellectually trained. I don't understand healing, and not only that, people come from a long way here to be treated by you, not by a dumb American. And he would just laugh, and then it would become a routine. Like every 3 or 4 months, he would say, "Okay, Paul, now is the time for you to come forward. Now you have to come and lay your hands on, because you've seen enough and you've heard enough about healing. You've heard all the talks about healing. You've heard all the talks about why people suffer." And I would just say, no, Duskless, I'm a mental person and I don't understand healing, which was the truth. And funny enough, and poignantly enough, when Duskless had the stroke, I would sit every night by his bedside during the nights. And I could see that he was in some pain because the tumor was in the left hemisphere that exploded. And you know, one night he was really struggling with pain and he was restless. And then I just said, okay, Duskless, now I'm going to come forward now. I'm going to come forward now. Yeah, welcome. And you're going to be my first client. And so I laid my hand on his left hemisphere and he went into a very peaceful sleep. And still to this day, I have no idea if he was just doing that to build me up as a healer or if it really worked. In any case, when I was in Munich and people started to come to me, I had no form as a healer because Duskless was formless. Still, the Duskless was in me as you know, after watching Duskless heal for 6 years, he was really like a role model for me to some extent. And I just started then working with people directly on the places that were suffering on the body or in the solar plexus and so forth. And then slowly I started to understand healing a little more, and I started to develop my own method, and that's what I teach actually here in Germany. This is my center here. We're in southern Germany here. And I've also taught my healing education. I teach it in Denmark up until the COVID came, and I taught it also in Switzerland and Austria, and also for a while I was teaching it in Detroit. Funny place to teach healing outside of Detroit. And like I said, you know, I've been doing this now for 25 years, and it's really interesting for me because, you know, if you read the Magus and Strovolos, and I'm sure you all have, or you know, then if you read this, you realize that Markides had his own Daskalos. What I mean by that is you get the impression from the Magus and Strovolos that Daskalos was a very, very powerful healer, and that he had abilities that many people don't have. And as I watched him heal these 6 years, that's what through these glasses of Markides, I was watching Daskalos heal. And I just thought Daskalos is just an extraordinary man and has extraordinary abilities. And then when I started working on people in Germany, you know, especially people who were really suffering from serious illness, both emotionally and physically, or young children who had cancer, you know, I thought that I had to do something. I had to do something to help these people get free from illness. You know, I have a helper syndrome from my childhood, which thank God I let go of, because helper syndrome is not a very nice thing. And then I realized something that I didn't realize during my time in Cyprus, is that although Daskalos said this all the time, Daskalos said, you know, Daskalos never called himself a teacher, and he never called himself a healer. You know? And I call myself a healer because I have to call myself something, you know, and people know me as a healer here in Germany and other countries, but I'm not a healer either, and that's what I'm going to explain now. What I realized is the more that I tried to do something to help somebody, first of all, I wasn't doing well, because consciously or subconsciously, I was taking something from the client. And also because I was feeling their pain, you know, and I felt, sometimes I got very frustrated. And I don't know how many of you know this, but Daskalos has a very close relationship with the Apostle John. They shared a life together in Palestine, in Jerusalem, 2,000 years ago. John was the youngest of the apostles, and Daskalos was incarnated in Jerusalem as a young boy, 12 years old. He wrote a book about this. And they got to know each other then, because in a sense, John took Daskalos under his wing during the 3 years that Christ was teaching and healing. And I saw this, you know, when I was sitting in the Stoa, I would always sit to the left of Daskalos, because I felt like I was his bodyguard, because I was 28 years old and I was young and I was strong. And so I made sure he had water and everything. And then I saw a golden halo come over Daskalos and just envelop him, you know, drop down over him. And then I started to see that with my eyes open. And I went to Daskalos. I said, Daskalos, you know, after about 10 minutes of you talking, a golden halo cloud comes over you and stays over you. What is it? And he said, oh, very good, Paul. Good, Paul. That's the Apostle John. He gives the talks. And when John comes over me, then I just get out of my body. My body stays there. My physical body stays there because John needs it. And I find a place to sit in the room and I listen to the talk like you do. And the room was full and there's no empty chair. So, but I guess he didn't need a chair. And then, you know, in Munich, I had some people, after Daskalos passed over, I had some people who were seriously ill with hepatitis B or with a cholesterol problem. And I treated them a number of times, and they got better, but not fast enough. Not fast enough to block the illness from basically taking their lives if it continued. And in my frustration, I just called out. I just said, you know, what should I do? And then, I know this is going to sound a bit arrogant, but then John appeared to me. And John said, Paul, you know, you should read my gospel. And I said, you know, John, I've read your gospel a dozen times. He said, can you read it again? And I said, and I'll read it with you, he said. And I said, okay, John, I'll read the gospel again from start to finish. It takes maybe 2 hours. And then he pointed out to me that in the Gospel of John, without an exception, Christ heals on the 6th hour or the 6th day, without an exception. Meaning that these people were in a state where they've gone through what we might say the first 6 days of creation, and we're ready for something extraordinary, like a profound healing, that they would come into the absolute love. And then John encouraged me, he said, tell them to come to you 7 times. Okay, this is the 7 treatment. Some of you know it, I think, I don't know. Tell the people to come to you 7 times, and then we will draw up a perfect plan for each one of your clients that will then unfold over these 7 treatments. And this is 25 years ago. And so I started asking people, are you prepared to take the time and the money to come to me 7 times? And because they were helpless, they said, sure. And it started to work really, really well. And the advantage of that is that as a healer, as a so-called healer, when you see that the divine mercy is working through you or flowing through you, and I use that word flowing quite deliberately, and you see that each individual is being treated by the divine mercy completely individually, completely, and you see that for every one of us, there's a plan, because the divine mercy knows where we're standing in life. In other words, each one of us is built up from 3 sources of karma, according to Dasa's 2. One is called family karma, and the other one is called personal karma, karmic patterns. Okay, and they flow into us and into the chakras in the form of elementals. And these elementals are spread out through the chakras, and we carry them in the chakras, mostly subconsciously. And we all know now, because we're all going through a major paradigm shift, a paradigm shift like this paradigm shift we haven't experienced in a long, long time. And it's not just the COVID, and it's not just the politics, which is getting crazy, and not just the racial hatred or the misogyny, which is getting crazy. It's a major paradigm shift. And there's a reason for that, because when a paradigm dies out, then it is no longer functional. We can't go too much into that, but it has a lot to do with the last 2,000 years with the development of the organized church, either Catholic or Orthodox or Protestant, basically built up out of the cornerstones of complete repression of the divine feminine. It's a fact. And when you build up a culture out of only the masculine principles, then at some point it's going to break down, and it's breaking down. And thank God it's breaking down. And when it breaks down, then there's a lot of chaos, and there has to be a lot of chaos, because chaos gives a lot of room for a new birth, a rebirth, and that's what we're going through. That's what we're going through. So in any case, John was counseling me to have people come to me 7 times. And I saw that it worked, and I started to teach it then. And then I had a 4-day course on healing, because people said, Paul, we see you can heal. Can you teach us to heal? Along with my wife back then. And now my wife is doing her own work, which is extraordinary. And I said, yeah, I can try to teach you how to heal. I was still relatively formless, but we can try to do it. And then that started to kick in and work well. And it led to healing 2, and then it led to healing 3, and it led to healing 4. And that's what I teach here. I teach 4 courses, each one of them 4 days long, which we go deeply into. The first 4 days, we go deeply into the basic teachings of Dasa's, or actually the deeper teachings of Dasa's, the elementals, the 3 bodies, the sources of illness, emotionally and physically. And then in healing 2, we go into more the deeper causal work, how we can help people get free from family karma and so forth. And then healing 3, we go into the karmic levels. Not family karma, but now personal karma. And then healing 4, we go into what we call collective karma. That has to do with the paradigm shift. And that's what I teach here. And anyhow, so what was the advantage for me then to work with people 7 times was that I saw that people were treating unbelievably individually from the sources of mercy. And then I realized that I didn't need to do anything, that my responsibility as a healer was to be passive and to be present. And this is the whole paradox. As getting ready for this talk today, it's the paradox about healing is that there's nothing easier to do in the world, nothing easier to do in the world, and nothing harder to learn. And so you say, how can that be, that something so easy to do can be so hard to learn? And I'll tell you why. And I'll tell you why in my time with Daskalos, I didn't realize something fundamental to him that I realized later. And also that helped me open my eyes for who Jesus Christ was as a healer. And what is that? And like I said, even though Daskalos told me all the time that he's not doing anything, that the archangels are flowing through him into a client, I still didn't believe that. I believed Daskalos was doing something himself. And then as I started leading people through the 7 treatments and saw how beautifully they were being healed by the sources of divine mercy, I just said, my responsibility is to let the divine mercy flow through me into a client and to clean them and to clean the chakras and the organs and the glands and the lymph system and everything from as much as possible, And then I realized that my responsibility was to be fully passive, okay? And then I realized that Daskalos was passive as a healer, and he said so. And the funny thing about Daskalos said his role model as a healer was Christ himself, because he experienced Christ. And he said that he watched Christ heal 2,000 years ago in Cana, in Palestine, or Israel. Whatever you call it. A rose is a rose by any other name. And everybody thinks that Christ was probably the most extraordinary healer to live, at least that is recorded in books, the New Testament. And funny enough, there we missed the boat too, a lot of us, including myself for a long time, that Christ said time and time again, I'm doing nothing but my father and mother, or my father's doing everything through me. Christ said that all the time. Christ said, I do nothing on my own authority. I don't teach on my own authority. I don't heal on my authority. The origin of everything is doing that through me. And so I saw that, and it opened my eyes to the fact that I need to be really passive. And then a simple logic hit me that has a lot to do with healing. The more active a healer is, the more passive the divine mercy is. That means the more active we are. And how do we define activity? Activity has to do with a lot of conscious structures we have, as well as a lot of subconscious structures we have. Even a helper syndrome is active. When I subconsciously want to free somebody, then my ego is involved. The ego is totally active, okay? And I'm not against the ego. It's just that I know the ego has no place when we lay the hands on each other. In other words, we have to become servers to the divine. We have to surrender to the divine and be there fully and have a good technique. And I do think I have good techniques because they're not mine. They were given to me by John. And if we have a good technique that flows over 45 minutes or an hour, and then takes place 7 times over a course of 7 months, because 4 weeks between each treatment. And then we're just in this, and this is what I describe a healer. And this is exactly what I teach here, is that really a healer is a riverbed. And why is that so important? Some people say channel. Well, I think a riverbed is a better description because a riverbed is fundamental to a river. Without a riverbed, a river just flows chaotically all over the landscape. We know this about Egypt. When the spring flooding starts in Egypt, back then, now they have the Nassar Dam, it was just chaotic, So a riverbed is very important for the divine mercy because it needs to flow into the chakras where the suffering is stored. It needs to flow into the organs where the damage is stored. And the beautiful idea that we're riverbeds for the divine mercy is that, first of all, who makes a riverbed is the river, okay? So a lot of us, one of the older terms for spiritual healer in English is a faith healer. In German, you call it geistliche Heiler. And it has to do, in German, you call it Glauben, and Glauben is really belief. So belief is very important because without belief, the divine mercy has no door to flow through into us, you know. So belief is everything. Belief is a riverbed, you know. So how does a healer like myself or you or any of you, because I'm sure some of you heal, how do you manage to become, first of all, a very wide riverbed, a very deep riverbed, and basically an empty riverbed? Because that's the goal, right? I mean, we would say that Jesus Christ was what's this great river that flows through South America? Doesn't matter. The longest river in the world is the Nile. And Dascalus was an extraordinarily deep and wide and empty riverbed. Dascalus had no ego. Dascalus had no personal ego. That's why he was an extraordinary healer. And so, first of all, the divine mercy makes from us a riverbed because the divine mercy shows that it's there for everybody in very unique terms and handles everybody beautifully and frees each one of us as much as we're allow ourselves to be free. I say that intentionally, as much as we allow ourselves to be free, because the divine mercy would free us from suffering in a second if we would let that happen. I know that. And the beautiful thing about being a riverbed and going into the riverbed mode, because that's what I do for the hour that I treat somebody, I'm completely a riverbed, is that you learn pretty quickly that you have nothing to do with healing, nothing, you know, because I'm just a person, you know, who has suffered from a lot of karma, a lot of family karma, a lot of personal karma. And I may not be the cleanest person in the world, but I know that when I go into my treatment room here, that I have to leave my egoism here in this room here, my teaching room. And I've trained myself to do that. And there's rituals that we can do. This is what I teach my students here, how we can come pretty quickly into the riverbed modus and let go of everything that the divine mercy can flow through us into a client. And like I said, the great advantage of that is that over the course of years, our belief starts to expand and grow and grow and grow. And the beautiful thing about that is, sure, our hands are the riverbed. My hands are the riverbed. My heart's the riverbed. But the biggest riverbed from each one of us is actually our belief, you know, our faith. And the bigger our faith is, the more the divine mercy can flow through us without any resistance and any blocks. So that was for me a key moment because I'll never forget that. And as I've been working on, you know, thousands of people over the last 25 years, I've learned that the more involved I get in healing, then the less successful the healings are. And I get a confirmation of that all the time, you know, because still when they bring a child to me who's 4 years old and is full with cancer or is going blind, then, you know, then of course I suffer for that child too. But I've learned to turn that off when a child goes in and lies on the table and I lay my hands on them, because I know that I can't do anything about that, but I know the divine mercy can and will, as long as I'm present and as long as I'm passive. So the reason, what's really nice for me, the Amazon River, thank you. Yeah, the Amazon River, yeah, the Amazon River. The reason why I said in the description for this talk, what is the difference between a spiritual path and spiritual healing? And the answer is nothing. There is no difference. Why do I say that? What is the goal for all of us when we want to go, when we're on a spiritual path? Okay. I believe that all of us would answer that what we want from the spiritual path is that we want to experience more of the original love. We want to experience more of the original peace, the original trust, the original joy. We want to experience all these beautiful primordial energies that come directly from the source. And we want to experience them in a meditation, and we want to experience them in our daily life, okay? And one of the advantages of deciding to be a healer who's passive, and that means you're basically a riverbed, but a living riverbed, is that don't forget that a riverbed is not dry. If a riverbed, a riverbed is soaking wet, meters into the earth, right? Because the water permeates the earth and makes the riverbed bigger and so forth. And that means, and I sound like the luckiest man in the world, and sometimes I feel like I am, because people ask me, Paul, you must meditate. You were a student of Daskalos, and Daskalos meditated, which he didn't, by the way. He didn't have to, because he was so plugged in, he didn't need to meditate. He prayed. How many hours do you meditate? And I say, let me open my calendar, and today's Saturday, and I have 4 clients coming to me. And I say to them, honestly, today I will meditate for 4 hours. And I mean it. I mean it. Because when I go in there and the clients lay on the table and I'm doing nothing for 4 hours, then it is the nicest thing in the world to do, And you get addicted to it, because and this is why I said there's nothing easier than healing, because you don't heal, right? All you need is a good technique, and you need to train yourself to be passive. But even that you don't need to do, because the Divine Mercy will show you that you're not passive enough. But the problem with children of Western culture, and I'm one of them, is that we are trained at a very young age, to be active, right? So most of us didn't stand up until we were 1 year old. When we reach the age of 1 year old, 1 year, sorry, I'm forgetting my English. We stand up, and then we start to partake in the world more. For the first year, we're lying on our back, fully dependent on our parents for everything. But then we get the message that we need to start doing something, playing, if we're lucky enough to play. And then we go to maybe kindergarten. And then at a young age, maybe with 2 years old, we'll go to kindergarten. There we're there with 20 other kids. And maybe we brought our toys with us. And maybe the other kids want to steal our toys and play with our toys. So we have to protect our toys. And we do that through activity. We say, nah, this is my toy. And then we develop an egoism because we say, this is mine, 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 mine. And that continues, because then when we go to grade school and we're flooded with languages and with mathematics and with science and with geography and history, we suddenly become very self-important, because we have to prepare ourselves for tests, and we have to get good notes because we want to do well in life. And that means most of us are going full speed through life, really full speed through life, being fully active from the moment we stand up. And we're so trained by German culture or by American culture or by other Western countries, and now even in the East, of course, because the East is turning into the West. And their beautiful religions are becoming more Westernized, because they're becoming totally puritanical and also male dominated. Doesn't matter. That's what happens when a paradigm ends. That's when the fecal matter hits the air moving machine. uh, is that we're so trained to be active that when a teacher like myself or Daskalos tells you don't be active when you heal, but lay your ego to the side and be passive, well, we say that's easy. That's easy. And I tell you, it's not easy, because cell memory and the DNA and everything is totally programmed since about 2,000 years, when you believe in reincarnation, to be active, to go into war, to go into dogmatism, to go into conflict, to go into dominance, to go into everything. That our whole being is programmed to be active. That we even when most of us sleep and we dream for 2 hours a night, or we dream, even in our dreams, we're incredibly active. It's funny, one of the things that I'm doing, because I have not a very nice history with the Catholic Church. I'm not Catholic, I'm actually raised Quaker, but I know that I have a lot of past lives I have a lot of past lives involved in the foundation of the Catholic Church. That's why I take the Catholic system so personally. I even have some Catholic nuns who took the education here, and I told the Catholic nuns, I said, I think I'm more Catholic than you. And they said, Paul, how can you be more Catholic than we are? I was 30 years in Africa with the Catholic Church. I said, trust me. One of the things I've been doing here in Germany is I've been making the so-called lost gospels. You must all know about the Nag Hammadi find in 1944. So in 1944, so they discovered a tone vessel in the earth, and they dug it up. Apparently it's not true, but they dug it up and they found all these lost gospels. They weren't lost because they were hidden. You shouldn't call them lost gospels when they were intentionally hidden from us. And they include the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Philip and the Gospel of Maria Magdalena and many, many other Gospels. And because I want to make good for my karma, I've been making films out of them. I've been making films in the German language, productions of these as films. You can see them if you speak German there. You can watch them on YouTube. And so I've gone deeply into the lost Gospels, the forbidden Gospels. And it's opened my eyes, because Christ says in one of them, I think it's Thomas, how do you know somebody who is basically a man of God? How do you know somebody who's like me? And they all say, I don't know. And then he answers, he says, because they bring as much time in relaxation as they do in activity. Okay? Whoa. When I read that, I thought, can it be that Christ said that somebody who's following the Christ path is allowed to relax as much as they are to work? Okay? And I think that that's probably one of the key messages of Christ that we lost in the construction of the New Testament. Because the New Testament is a construction of 27 books, and at the time that they put the New Testament together, they had over 100 books, and they carefully, and I mean really carefully, chose some beautiful books like Matthew and Luke and Marcus and John, but a lot of other ones they excluded for a very good reason. And so there's a Christianity which formed the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church and the Protestant churches, which have nothing to do with the Christianity which may have came from Christ directly, which has a lot to do with Maria Magdalena, who Daskalos was no fan of. But it's pretty clear that Maria Magdalena and Christ were together in a deep, deep partnership. And it's pretty clear that Maria Magdalena was the closest student and the closest recipient of the teachings of Christ. So that's why it's important to read these Gospels, because you especially if you want to understand. And this is why, everybody said, well, why? When I was with Daskalos, somebody from Switzerland came and said, Daskalos, here's the Gospel of Thomas. Did Thomas write it? And Daskalos laid his hand on it. I was there. I have the copy with me. And Daskalos said, don't waste your time reading this. Thomas wrote it, but it's nonsense. Okay? Now, And now I'm making it, now I made a film out of it, and I just think, Dasclus must be laughing in his grave, because the fact is that Dasclus is a child of another era. 30, if you think about the Dasclus had a stroke about 28 years ago, and where we're standing now at the end of a paradigm, it is like 200 years. Things have changed so radically, and I know a lot of you are at home in Dasclus's teachings, and I'm considered completely a black sheep, because because I teach, I tried to bring in my own way Dasclus's teachings into a new time. And people say, you have to teach exactly what Dasclus taught. I said, Dasclus told us all, do you know what salt tastes like? And he said, if you don't know what salt tastes like, go to the salt mine, take a pick and harvest some salt and taste it. Then you know what it tastes like. And Dasclus gave us all the tools to do this. And Dasclus's teachings are not dead. We shouldn't do to Dasclus what we did to Rudolf Steiner. Enough of my rant. Okay, doesn't matter. You know why they call it black sheep a black sheep? I bet you don't know this. I'm going to give you some trivia. Because it's the only sheep that when you shear it from its wool, you can't take black wool and dye it into another color. It stays black. So that's why a white sheep, you can take the wool from a white sheep, share it, and you can turn it in any color you want. That's why it's called a black sheep. So be proud if you're a black sheep, because you always keep your colors, your color. I'll tell you, the fact is that I teach this openly, and I have no problem with it. In June of 1994, Dasclus had a massive stroke in the left hemisphere of the brain, massive, totally incapacitated him. And I don't know how many of you know this, but my first year by Dasclus in 1988, 1989, Dasclus would teach publicly that the physical body is a prison. He would teach it publicly. And I got to know a lot of people who were coming there, because one of my jobs was to open the Stoa and to see people and to take their names down. And I started to talk to them, and a lot of them tried to commit suicide or contemplated committing suicide because they were depressed. And I started thinking about it, said, this doesn't really make much sense. Dasclus for them is a role model of somebody in the Christ consciousness. And Dasclus as a role model is very important for these people. And when this teacher, who's Christ-like, is telling them that their body is a prison, it's only going to confirm how they already feel. So I went to Dasclus, and I was really meek. I was shy, and I'd only been there for a couple of months, and I was in awe of Dasclus, and I didn't want to ever challenge him. But I went to him and said, Dasclus, I've talked to a couple of people here, and a lot of them have tried to commit suicide unsuccessfully, and they're thinking about doing it again. And when you, as a Christ figure, is telling them that the body's a prison, it can be that they go back to Germany and they try again, because you confirmed one of their belief systems. Dasclus looked at me in the eye and he said, Paul, you're right. And we, because Dasclus always said we. He never said I. Dasclus never said I. He always said we. Try to go one day, wherever you are, try to go one day in your community and not say one time I. Just say we. It's really hard. Doesn't matter. Try it. That's your house. That's your homework. Dasclus never said I. He never said I, because he was one with John. And so Dasclus said, you're right, we shouldn't teach that anymore. The next day we were down at the Stoa, Dasclus was sitting there. He was in the middle of a talk and he said, the spirit is willing and the flesh is weak and the body is a prison. And then he covered his mouth, turned to me, and he laughed. He turned to me and he laughed. He said, I'm not allowed to teach that anymore. He told everybody in the Stoa, I'm not allowed to teach that anymore. It made me look really bad, because he was pointing me out as the one who corrected him. He said, I'm not allowed to teach that anymore. So he said the body is a present, but he didn't mean that. And then 5 years later, 6 years later, he had a massive stroke in the left hemisphere. If you know anything about the two hemispheres of the brain, that, you know, only the left hemisphere can define the body as a prison. Only. The right hemisphere is totally connected with everything, totally loves peace and harmony. It has a problem with conflict because it's basically feminine. And the left hemisphere loves wisdom, it loves math, it loves definition, it loves duality. And this is what happened to Daskalos, is Daskalos, even though he was in the Christ consciousness, he had no peace with the body or with the earth. None. Yeah. Even though he was terribly, he loved the earth, he loved his garden, he loved to cook. He just didn't have peace because he was so at home in the spirit. And so the stroke was a correction for Daskalos. I know this. I saw it happen. You know, because first Daskalos resisted the stroke fully, and then around October, about 5 months after the stroke, he was totally at peace with it, and had his humor back, and was just smiling, even though he couldn't talk. The family was getting really frustrated. It said, you know, Paul, so many letters are coming from Germany saying, you know, if Daskalos is a great healer, why doesn't he heal himself? And why doesn't he, you know, if he's going to pass over, why doesn't he do it? Why does he stay in this body which is dysfunctional? Can you please write a letter to these people in the family's name and tell them to stop writing this? And I said, okay. So I sat down and I wrote a 2-page letter saying, thank you for your concern, you know, and you know, and then I wrote 2 sentences saying, you know, Daskalos will decide if he's healed, period, or Daskalos will decide if he moves on. And then again, best wishes, family attachments. Okay. And so the next day I go to Daskalos, he's sitting in a wheelchair, which he said to me, Paul, you know, I have only one wish, and you know I have no wishes. I have one wish, and my one wish is that I never end up in a wheelchair, and I'll never want somebody to take care of me. And Daskalos always said, be careful what you wish, because it's going to happen to you. If not in this life, in the next life. Okay? And it happened to him. He was in a wheelchair and he had to be taken care of, everything. Doesn't matter. He was graceful about it. So I go to Daskalos, I said, Daskalos, I wrote a letter now for the family. Can I read it to you? And so he said, He couldn't talk, but he could grunt. So I sat down like I did in the stove for the last 6 years. And I started reading the letter. And he said, the first part was okay. He approved of it. And then I came to these 2 lines. And I said, and Daskalos will decide if he's healthy or not, or if he's healed, or he will decide if he passes on. And then he got angry. And I never saw Daskalos angry in 6 years. Never. I never saw him once angry, except sometimes with the family and sometimes with the Turks. Because of the Turkish invasion in 1974. And he got angry. And I said, Daskalos, I think I did something wrong. He said, yes, you did. I said, can I read it again that I can make everything better? And he said, And so I read the letter again, and he approves of the first part. And then we come to these 2 lines, and he grabs my hand with his left hand because he was paralyzed on the right side, takes my hand and the letter, and he throws it up into the air, pointing towards heaven. And I said, I think I finally get it. I may be a dumb American, but I think I finally understand. You did not decide to have the stroke, and you will not decide if you're healed, and you will not decide if you pass on. And he said, yes. And so that was, up until that point, he was struggling against the stroke. And then I could see he surrendered to it, and we have a lot of cases of this. There was a beautiful man called B.D. Griffin. I don't know if you know about him. He was an Englishman who was an Anglican priest who went to India and built a monastery in southern India in Kerala to have an exchange with Christianity, with Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. And exactly in Dascalus's age, he had a massive stroke in the left hemisphere. And he was frail. Dascalus was strong. He was very frail. You know, he had a gray beard and he was small. And everybody thought that B.D. Griffin would pass over from this. And he didn't, thank God. And he was able to talk again and even stand and walk again. I exchanged some letters with him about Dascalus. And then a television reporter came down from Delhi and said, you know, Mr. Griffin, can we ask you a few questions about your work here? And he said, sure. And then they did. And then he said, the interviewer said, can I ask you a question about your stroke? And he said, sure. And he asked him, he said, what was the stroke all about? And then B.D. Griffin said, I'm so happy that I had the stroke. I thought for the last 70 years that Christianity had everything and only to do with Jesus Christ. And now I realize that we have to surrender, and he used that word, surrender to the divine feminine. Okay? We have to surrender to the divine feminine. And that's exactly what Dascalus did, because through the stroke, Dascalus had complete peace with the body afterwards and complete peace with the earth. He could actually, I'm sure he could celebrate it. That was, for me, I have to say that was Dascalus's last initiation. Anyhow, I've gone astray because I'm not supposed to be talking about that. I'm supposed to be talking about healing. So this is what I do. I teach healing. I'm there when healing takes place because I'm a riverbed for the Divine Mercy. I lead also sacred travels to our ancestral lands. I lead trips every year to Egypt and to Anatolia, to Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe. I assume you all know what Göbekli Tepe is. It's the largest temple complex in the world and the oldest. It's 12,800 years old. And Karahan Tepe, which is 40 kilometers away from Göbekli Tepe, is only 5% dug out, and it's bigger than Göbekli Tepe, and it's 13,500 years old. Pretty impressive. Really impressive. It's turned the world on its head because we thought we were hunter-gatherers back then. And there are 28 of these tepes discovered in the meantime. And they're just remarkable because nobody knows who built them and nobody knows what they mean. And they're constructed out of pillars carved out of one piece of limestone or sandstone, some of them 8 meters high, with very intricate animals chiseled into them. If you ever get a chance to go to Göbekli Tepe, then do it, because it's something like that you can't experience anywhere in the world. So I lead trips to these sacred lands that we can rediscover our primordial roots, and that's helped me to open my eyes to what Christianity is really about. Because Christianity is very unique, because in Christianity, the stress is on love. That's what Christ stressed love over everything, which makes it very unique. But I have to say something about some of these older belief systems, like the old Egyptian belief system and the old Hellenic Greek belief system and the Roman system that were coexisting in the time of Jesus Christ. They were very active and very thriving in Egypt and in Anatolia and the Greek islands. We make them small because we say they were polytheistic. But I want to tell you something about polytheism, which is what makes it very attractive, is that and this applies both to the Greeks and to the Romans and to the Egyptian. They had no fear because they built temples on the earth with the belief that the gods would abide with them. So they could go every day to their temples and meet with their gods. They had no shame because they never made a mistake. There was no sin. There was no original sin, and there was no sin for the death of Christ. And there was no guilt because nobody did anything wrong, because they believed that the original state was chaos. All three religions believe that on the beginning of time was chaos, and the gods are there to protect us of chaos. So if you look behind me, you see the 7 primary chakras there, right? I drew this for the talk. And you have 3 upper chakras, which is the crown chakra. You don't see that. Now I'm going to give you there. You see the crown chakra up there. And then you see the third eye, you see the throat chakra, you see the heart chakra, you see the solar plexus, you see the sacral chakra, and you see the root chakra. And I'm gonna ask you a very provocative question. If you go back to an incarnation at the time of Christ, where you were a young boy or girl in Luxor or Cairo or Ephesus or in Göbekli Tepe, how did you experience your chakras? And the answer is very easy. You experienced them as being equal. There was no difference between your crown chakra and your root chakra, because the root chakra was the center for creative power, the creative force, which is completely divine. Okay. So that's what I'm saying now. What happened with the advent of Christianity, and I teach Christianity with passion. I've been teaching in the last 2 weekends. I've been teaching a course on the 7 I Ams found in the Gospel of John, and I'm teaching next week in a course on the 7 miracles found in the Gospel of John. And I love Christianity, but still, we have to realize that something very bizarre happened with Christianity. Is that we turn this model on its head. In other words, with Christianity, Christianity had to fight to exist. Christianity really had to fight to exist, because Christianity is basically a provincial religion belonging to the Sea of Galilee in Jerusalem. And it had to fight against the old gods with violence, which it did. So Christianity became a world religion through violence. And not only that, once Christianity became established because of Constantine, because Constantine said you can no longer attack Christians, and then became more established in Ephesus in the year 431, then they started to take revenge, and they started to tear down all the temples and destroy all the statues, which is okay. And then Christianity became extremely patriarchal, extremely. All the priests up into the year 400 were married and had children, because we took the model of the rabbi as our model, and all rabbis are married and have children. And then suddenly in the year 400, it was forbidden for priests to become married. And that what happened was, over the course of the last 1600 years, the 3 upper chakras became separated and isolated from the 3 lower chakras. Do you understand? So we started to define the 3 lower chakras as being very human and very complicated, and actually as a distraction from spirituality. Okay, which was totally new, right? Totally new. So the solar plexus became the seat of the subconscious, according to Freud, and then to Jung, and to Dasklos. Dasklos said we're 90% subconscious. And when Dasklos says that with so much love, nobody has a problem with it. When a man like Dasklos says with so much love, you're 90% subconscious, he said, oh yeah, okay, I believe it. And then we define the sacral chakra, which I call the Hara chakra, as a place where we bring childhood. And childhood is a waste of time. It's the only time that we experience innocence, if we were lucky enough to experience innocence. And then the root chakra, which has a lot to do with sexuality and with existentialism, existence, became extremely complicated. And so what happened was we gave the permission to the upper chakras, especially the third eye, to define the lower chakras totally new. And there was a huge departure from the old belief system. Okay. So the old belief system from Egypt and from Anatolia and from the Greek islands, you were extremely integrated. I'm sure of it, I know it. You were extremely integrated. And not only that, your parents were integrated, because they were not busy with fear or with guilt or with shame. So they were much more loving to you. And as a role model, they were very attractive because they were extremely integrated, okay? And they had a lot more empathy for each other and for everybody. I'm sure of it. I mean, it's not that I want to bring back polytheism. But even Christianity is not really monotheistic. You know, there's nothing about Christianity which is monotheistic. When you call the archangels and the Holy Spirit and the Christ Logos and the three are one, then you're playing a word game. Still, we find monotheism very, very modern. Actually, monotheism is actually very primitive because once you start believing in monotheism, like Akhenaten did, and then you start creating a full disintegration of the self, and we start pitting ourselves against the earth, against the body, and against the animal kingdom. You know, because we say we're special, we say we're unique. You know, we're allowed to dominate over the earth and over the oil fields and over the air and over the waterways and over all the animals because we are top dog here. And we become separate from nature, you know, and that's what happened. And that's what we've been doing. We've been pushing back the boundaries of nature for the last 1600 years. And that's why I say, you know, it is no wonder that we're experiencing extreme politics. Even now in the States, I don't know how many of you in the States, but we're having these trial now about the 6th of January. And that was pretty extreme. And we have an extreme situation with this virus, which we call the COVID, the way it's being treated by the pharmaceutical industry and also by health ministers, like here in Germany, Lauterbach, and in America, Fauci. It's extreme. And there's a lot of money being made off of vaccines, a lot of money being made off of vaccine. And the doctors have never been more wealthy, at least here in Germany, than they are now, because they get 28 euros for every time they vaccinate somebody. So nobody wants to stop vaccinating. Nobody wants to stop the COVID because they're making too much money off of it. And why is that? How can we understand that? Because we know that it seems pretty chaotic what's going on. I mean, the ex-prime minister of Japan was shot dead yesterday. And Japan is a peace-loving nation because of World War II. So things are getting out of hand, or are they? This is the question. Well, what do we know about a paradigm shift is that when a paradigm collapses, then a new paradigm starts to be reborn. That's always the case. And why were we so preoccupied with patriarchy? Why were we so preoccupied with control and conflict for the last 2,000 years? And why were we so interested in totally dominating and repressing the feminine? Maybe the absolute deep point in that was the witch hunts not too long ago. Well, because I think we had to make a move away from matriarchy. You could say that matriarchy in Anatolia and Egypt was the ruling energy. I mean, don't forget that in Egypt at the time of Christ, Osiris had already passed over and was going into the underworld, and Isis, his wife and sister, was the main god in Egypt, and she was a woman. And in Anatolia, in the Greek islands, the main god without any question was Artemis, a woman. Okay, and Anatolia is well known because all of the goddesses there, including the Divine Mother from Göbekli Tepe and from Catalahuk, they had no male counterparts. Hekata, Sibylla, Artemis, they were all single women, as it were. So matriarchy was the rule for a long time, maybe over 10,000 years, maybe longer. And maybe we wanted to move away from that and go into patriarchy. I'd say maybe provocatively, because I'm sure we did. And now we've had the experience now for over 1,600 years where we've been building up our culture and world culture from patriarchy, including the nuclear family, and including our school system, including politics, external and internal, including the pharmaceutical industry, including everything, is built up primarily from masculine ideals and principles. And that's why it's collapsing. And there's something that Christ left us, which is really important. Two things that Christ left us, which is very, very important to know, is that we have two instances in the Bible where a paradigm collapsed. And one was the birth of Christ. So when the Immaculate Conception took place in Nazareth, and Joseph agreed to marry a pregnant woman, they had to travel to Bethlehem to register by the tax offices. And then Jesus was born in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. And King Herod found out about this because the three wise men visited him. And Herod was the ruling force of the land, one of the ruling forces, the Romans were. And he would have nothing to do with this. And he sent out his soldiers to kill every young boy under the age of 2. It's called the slaughter of the innocents. And you can't kill the Christ because the Christ is love, and you can't kill love. And what we're going through now, and then if you take the book of Revelations, which is the last book of the Bible, I don't know how many of you are versed in the book of Revelations. We do a seminar every year on the island of Patmos where St. John received the book of Revelation from the Christ. It's a conflict between an old force, which is the status quo, which is being threatened by the development of a new earth. So the book of Revelations in a nutshell is a new earth has to come into being, that the heavenly kingdom can drop down, okay? It's this principle from Christ that you can't put old wine into an old wineskin because it will burst and you won't have the wineskin or the wine. And this is what happens in the book of Revelations. It's a huge war between prevailing forces, which are negative, even devilish, and then a fight between a new birth, symbolized by a pregnant woman and by the Archangel Michael, who fights against the devil. And that means that love is being born. And every time love is being born, then the counter forces would become extremely aggressive. They have to. And the other thing is that the more aggressive the counter forces become, either in Pfizer or Moderna or other people like I don't know how you feel about Mr. Trump. He's definitely an interesting man. Was in deep shit, by the way. And we don't know if in 2.5 years he's going to be in the White House or in the prison. Doesn't matter. We'll see. Time will tell. Is that always when love is being reborn around us, then the forces which are embedded in money making and control become extremely aggressive, like the pharmaceutical industry, and like the medical industry, and like the politics. And they get more and more aggressive, okay? So that's what's happening now, is we've lived for the last 1,600 years in complete conflict and complete disintegration. And don't forget, if you look at that picture that I drew behind me, I think I missed my calling. My daughter, who now lives in LA as an actress and a model and as a singer, she used to say to me when she was a young girl, Papa, you should have been an artist. You draw such beautiful pictures. So at least that's nice that your kids believe in you so much. But you see that in the middle of that, in the middle of the 7 chakras is the heart chakra, okay? The heart chakra. And the heart chakra in spirituality is the alpha and omega. We all adore the heart chakra because it's the center of love. And every day, the heart pumps 7,000 liters of blood through the body to keep the body alive. You know? So the heart, the organ, the heart is a symbol for the center of the body, and it's also the church of the body. And I have to ask myself the question, as Christianity unfolded, and then also Judaism, all the Judaic religions unfolded, and we started to invest more in conflict and control. What happened to the heart chakra? So my personal belief is in Luxor, in Luxor or Cairo in the year 0, or in Anatolia, that the chances are that the heart chakra was open and that we were treating each other with empathy, and love and compassion was probably much more likely. But we've been closing down the heart chakra for the last 1,600 years as a protection, basically. But the heart chakra has to close it down, because if we're experiencing inside of us conflict because of this division that I just talked about, or if we're experiencing outside a conflict, like in a marriage, a dysfunctional marriage, or in a society which is not functioning, that heart chakra is going to close down as a protection. You know? And what I know now is that what's being born now in the ashes, like the phoenix is rising out of the ashes now, and more, because we're pretty far through this paradigm shift, if you want to believe it. I know we're far through it. Is that we're going to come into a new consciousness, which is going to be the polar opposite of what we've been experiencing. It's going to be built up of harmony. It's going to be built up of peace. It's going to be built up of integration. It's going to be built up of equality and righteousness, fairness, and sympathy, because we spent enough time in the opposite. And that means we're totally ripe to be fully transformed. I'll share with you something personal, is that, as I said, I've been leading people through these 7 treatments for 25 years. And because I trained myself to be passive, or the Divine Mercy told me to be passive, when I lay my hands on a client, for this hour, I'm not there. I'm totally present, but I'm not there. Which means I don't gauge what flows through me. I don't have to gauge. I don't have to control what flows through me. This is the last thing I want to do, is to control that, because it means I'm involved. And what's interesting, about 5 years ago, I noticed that the 7 treatments were increasing in intensity. What do I mean by that? Well, for the first 10 years, it was quite peaceful. Maybe after the 4th, 5th treatment, somebody would go through real hell because they were confronted with patterns. And then it would be peaceful again. And suddenly they started to get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And now most clients say they cannot believe how strong the 7 treatments are. And why is that? Well, it's a confirmation of what I'm saying. When we enter a paradigm shift, something beautiful happens. Daskalus used to tell us that karma is our best friend, because through karma, we learn what we're doing wrong. Karma basically corrects what we're doing wrong: lifestyles, belief systems. And Daskalus said, there's no good karma, no bad karma, but it constantly teaches us how to live better. And now, this is the question now, because all of us are still busy with family karma, personal karma, and collective karma. What happens when a new paradigm starts to emerge out of the ashes, out of the old paradigm, and it's radically different than the old paradigm? Is that all of the karma that we have now no longer applies to us. Take for example, family karma. A lot of us experienced our parents as role models. If you're a boy, a man like I am, and you stand up, you realize that you're endowed with something down there, and you realize you're going to be a man, right? And so the moment you realize you're going to be a man, you need to have orientation. And so your father is there as a man, and as a husband, and as a father. And that's your role model, whether you like it or not. And for the women, the opposite. They need a role model, and that's mama. And I tell you one thing: when a paradigm collapses, it's very, very, very difficult for a family to be healthy. Very. Why? Because the role models that our parents had were our grandparents. And if you think about your grandparents, I know both my grandparents, they're long since dead. They were a mess. They were extremely successful, but they were emotionally a mess. And my parents were both philosophers. My father was a Rhodes Scholar, and they both studied at Yale, and they were completely stuck in their childhood, my parents. I can say this, they've passed over in the meantime. But they were inside, they were just like little children. And this is what I'm saying, is most of the role models that we have now, and even our children have now, are not that integrated. They're not, you know, because they couldn't be. Because when a paradigm collapses, then all the role models collapse. And that's the bad news. The good news is we're coming into a state pretty quickly, actually, where we don't need any karma. I make a joke here that here in Germany, I say, you know, I'm like somebody who builds custom designed shoes. You know, I have a shop and I build shoes to fit to your size. And they're really nice shoes and they cost a lot of money. But as a shoemaker, I tell you, pretty soon you're not going to get any shoes. And I'm a healer on paper, you know, and I have no problem in saying this. I live off of karma. I make my living from karma. And I make a pretty good living from karma because right now, when a paradigm collapses, people need help. And actually, spiritual healing is one of the best ways to get out of deep shit. It really is. Because spiritual healing, especially when the healer is passive, I tell you, so what I say is, you know, I'm like a shoemaker who tells you pretty soon you don't need shoes. And now as a healer, I'm telling you pretty soon you don't need karma because the time for this karma is over. And I have no problem. I would love for all of us to come into a state where we're just free of karma. And that means free of conflict and free of illness and free of everything. And we're going in that direction. And I'm sure I'll have enough work until then. So what I'm saying now is that, you know, it's like this. It's like, you know, it's like you have a kindergarten and you have like 25 5-year-olds and you give these children, you know, like 25 cans of different colored paints with paintbrushes. And you put them in a white room with 4 white walls, white floor, and you say, have fun. And you close the door. An hour later, you go in and that room is filled with color and the kids are all filled with color and there's paint everywhere. And then you tell the children, now clean it up. And the children say, wait a minute, why'd you give us the paint? Why'd you give us the paintbrushes? We have to clean it up. We can't clean it up. And that's where we're standing now. That's exactly where we're standing now. Because if you look at this model here, you don't have to believe it. You don't have to believe it. But if you look at the conflict within the chakra system, and then alone, if you take the 2 hemispheres of the brain, which are basically 2 different personalities, there's a wonderful Englishman. His name is Ian McGilchrist. I don't know if you've heard of him. He wrote a beautiful book called The Emperor and His Messenger. And he's an art therapist, an art historian, and also a therapist and a philosopher. Very fine man, Ian McGilchrist. And he does videos on YouTube and they just blow you away. And he wrote a book about 10 years ago called The Emperor and His Messenger. And he proves that Western civilization is built up about 95% out of the left hemisphere of the brain. 95% out of the left hemisphere of the brain. Now, many of you might say, well, then why? That makes sense because we're 95% right-handed. Just because we're 95% right-handed doesn't mean we have to be built up 95% out of the left hemisphere of the brain and totally separated from conflict and from peace and integration and stuff like that. So this is what I'm saying is that right now we are such a mess inside of ourselves that if you go to a therapist and have hours and hours of counseling, it might help to sort it all out. Or if you take psychopharmaca or something like that, God knows it might, or if you smoke more marijuana or do ayahuasca or something, it might help. I don't know what you do. But really, if you can find a healer who is passive, who is a riverbed, and has a technique that unfolds over 7 months, then Divine Mercy says, I'm going to flow through that healer and clean that room up. And that's exactly what the Divine Mercy is doing here, here in the treatments that I'm giving. And also, I've probably trained about 1,000 healers, and they're telling me the same thing. I've probably trained more than 1,000 healers. I'm getting old. Then the two hemispheres come together beautifully. And also you come into a state of serenity, and suddenly, without any explanation, you are experiencing an original trust, a primordial trust, and more love and more compassion and more sympathy. That's how quickly it goes through spiritual healing. So that's why you need to find somebody who doesn't promise you all of that, because if they're promising you all of that, the chances that they're going to be involved in your healing is not very good. I mean, are very good, because they probably have a technique which they learned, which has a lot to do with being active. And I'm not against these techniques at all. I know there's a lot of healing techniques which work really well. But if you want to work in this tradition of Daskalos, and you want to work in the tradition of Jesus Christ, then don't forget that these two people were completely passive, and they surrendered to a divine will completely. Okay? And that is the way to go to become a healer. Okay, I think I've talked long enough. I didn't mean to talk about the paradigm shift. I have my own theory about this, and it's built up on something that Rudolf Steiner said in 1930, and Daskalos confirmed in 1980 and 1990. They both said that the Christ energy is coming closer and closer to the ethereal planes of the earth. And Daskalos told me privately that he thought with the advent of the new millennium, that the Christ would be fully here for us as reborn in our hearts. And a lot of us were quite pensive in the year 2000. We thought, what's going to happen now? And then it went through with a whimper. Nothing major happened. Or did it? And what happened, I believe, is that the Christ was reborn in the year 2000. And that template that Christ left 2,000 years ago, from 33 years into the crucifixion and the resurrection, and then the resurrection and the crystal himmelfahrt, I forget how you say crystal, Christ's ascension, is a perfect model from Christ, perfect templates from Christ. And I believe that we're reliving it now, 2,000 years later. And don't forget, 2,000 years is really, especially when you go to Göbekli Tepe and you're standing in front of a 12,500-year-old temple, 2,000 years is nothing. 2,000 years is nothing. It's a blink of the eye. And I do believe very strongly that the Christ was reborn together with the divine feminine in a perfect duality in the year 2000. And if you say that we are in the year 2022, then the Christ is now 22 years old. And that means that we are well through, you don't have to believe this, okay? I've double checked it many, many times. We are well through the paradigm shift. And we have about 11 more years to go before we go through the crucifixion. Now, what is the crucifixion? If you read the Gospel of Philip, and you should read the Gospel of Philip, then please read a good translation, which is Wilson's translation. And there's no good performance of the Gospel of Philip in the English language. The Wilson translation is the best translation by far. Then Christ describes the crucifixion as a complete path of enlightenment. And through the crucifixion, we are resurrected in the perfect body, the causal body, the light body. So all this stuff about the crucifixion, I'm sitting here in Catholic Bavaria, where when I drive home, I drive over a beautiful landscape. It's gorgeous here, but you see one Christ path, you see one crucifixion path after the other built into the landscape with the 14 stations of the cross. I go by 3 of them on the way home. I drive a half an hour home, and immediately I come, I go by the Stations of the Cross on one hillside, and again, and then another. And of course, the Catholics here, they think the crucifixion is the most painful thing in the world. It's not. I'll tell you one thing, Duskus went through a crucifixion with a stroke. Meister Eckhart, the beautiful Meister Eckhart said in the year 1200, do you think it's painful to take up your cross and follow the Christ? And he says, what's really painful is not to take up your cross and follow the Christ. If you don't take up your cross and follow the Christ, then you're just going to live and dwell in pain, you know, whatever that means. So I've learned that the crucifixion, even the 14 stations of the cross, which they're not in any one gospel, is all about leaving suffering along the Via Dolorosa and coming into complete freedom and in complete self-awareness, self-realization, and purity. That's what the path in the Gospel of Philip goes from the Garden of Eden and the Garden of Gethsemane and ends symbolically that we come into complete unity in the bridal chamber, and we return to a complete innocence, which we had in the Garden of Eden, symbolically, symbolized by Eve. But we gain in that process full self-awareness. There's a nice German word for that, which is called Erkenntnis, which is more than self-awareness, but it's self-realization, which we didn't have. And that's what we win through this whole process. Okay, I don't know if you need a break because I talk longer than I planned to, but why don't we open it up? I'm fine. If you want to, if somebody has to go to the bathroom, I'm fine, but you can turn your mics on now, and I can take some questions if you want, if you have any questions or clarifications. If something wasn't clear, or you want me to go more deeply into something, then let me know, and I will gladly do that. So I'll turn my speaker on now. So do you have any questions or comments? It can't be. It can't be. It's funny, when I teach in Austria, which is about an hour away from here, and I say to the people there, do you have any questions? Nobody raises their hands. Why? They say, when we're in school, when the teachers ask us a question, if you raise your hand, you're going to show how dumb you are. Because that means you don't understand. So I can't believe that I just went on for 90 minutes about everything and you don't have any questions. I mean, it's fine with me. Okay. First, can you please say your name? You have to turn your mics on. I see that everybody has their mics off.
Okay, Paul, can you hear me?
I hear you, John, yeah.
Okay. I think the problem is there's so much to take in.
Say that again?
There's so much to take in, I don't know.
I know.
You know, so I'm trying to think of a question.
But don't try to think of a question.
I don't remember. You know, I suppose one question I had was over the time frame, you know, coming into the 5th dimension. And, you know, you said around the year 2000. So if we're talking 33 years till a crucifixion, then, you know, what's going to happen?
I can't tell you, and I can't go into it, but I know it's true because I'm a student of the life of Christ and I'm a student of the book of Revelations. I know it's true. And I know that the reason why we're going through the COVID, for example, and the authority that we gave the pharmaceutical industry and our health ministers is another evidence that these forces are getting even more aggressive now because it is emerging. It's emerging. That's what it is. And how it's going to unfold, I can't tell you exactly, but I'm glad that we're here to live through it. You can be really glad that we're here to live through it. Thank you, John. There was another question that must be, is that Alex? Hi, Alex. Are you Alex? Yeah, okay.
Hey, yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Can it be that whatever is coming is just a part of the circle of life? You know, like everything is after a certain time come back to the beginning, and that's before that happened. Like, I don't understand my English or not so well.
Where are you?
I'm in New York, but I'm Russian, and I've been in Cyprus, Sopanayota, and all that stuff. Okay, so my question is, maybe it's just the regular thing which is come to Earth when all kind of, sorry for my saying, shit comes to the certain point of life, everything get destroyed, and then it's we come to a new new life.
Whether this is just a cycle or whether there's linear development is the question.
No, maybe it's a spirit, you know, like a spiral. It goes up. It's not like a circle and it's coming back to.
That's a very good image. That's a good image. That's exactly it. You know, is that everything we're going through is leading to this path of if you read the Gospel of Philip, which I strongly recommend, then that's what it's all about. Is that we have to go through this trouble in order to wake up.
Okay, so then another question. By resisting this change, try to fix something which is going to be fixed by itself, we probably create new elementals, which is not that good, you know, so it's better to be passive. Okay.
You know, if we become, first of all, we really need to honor the forces which are against us. Because if we don't honor them, if we dishonor them, then we're not respecting the role they play. I mean, all of us are schooled in the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, okay? You know about this model, which comes from China, and then Hegel used it, and Marx used it. They talk about a thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, okay? So you have a thesis, which we've been living with for 1,600 years. Mm-hmm. And then we're experiencing right now the antithesis. Okay, and it's going to end in the synthesis, which is a new paradigm, which is emerging. And so you have to. That's why everything belongs to it. There's nothing foreign to it. And even if we start going against the pharmaceutical industry or here Lauterbach or Fauci or whatever, then we're forgetting that they are playing their role in it. You know,
we give them power,
and we give them power, but they have their own power, you know?
Yeah, but we put more fuel to the flame, fighting this thing.
True, and also, but still, to your question, whether we create elementals, we might create elementals, but in 11 years, those elementals are gone anyway. So don't worry.
Yeah. So I think it's better to just watch it and enjoy it and see what happened, like according to the
exactly
wisdom of like whatever you can call it.
You know, what actually, Alex, what this world needs right now, you know, here in Germany, it's pretty crazy right now. I've been here for 25 years. And I never expected the Germans to be so obedient as they are now. But they're obedient also in America. You know, vaccinating kids that were 6 months old, when they don't even have an immune system. I don't want to go into this because I made video talks about the childhood vaccination program, and YouTube took them off immediately. The thing is that we need to be awake and we need to be role models for other people. You know, if you can manage to stay in your peace and your joy and your humor, then that becomes contagious, because so many people slip into fear, they slip into rage, they slip into they get very fearful of what's going on. And when we know that there's a plan that's unfolding, and there is a plan that's unfolding, from my side, you don't have to believe me, of course, then we show that everything's okay. And we help them disarm these counterforces. You know, if I'm upset with Pfizer because Pfizer, who was one of the most disreputable in the pharmaceutical industries before the COVID, and is now making money hand over fist, then I'm giving Pfizer energy, you know? And I really get upset about Pfizer, more than Moderna and more than Johnson & Johnson. Pfizer to me is very devilish, and I don't like to use that word very much because there's nothing really devilish. I mean, Daskalos said all the time, you know, the devil himself is jealous how devilish human beings are. I tend to believe that.
But what Pfizer has to do with the human or people ignorance? People don't want to know things. They don't want to be curious about what's going on with their immune system, with their body, and so on. Even about their children, you know, like they don't care.
It's funny with me, Alex. I'll tell you one thing about my healing work, my ministry, they call it in English. It's 25 years I've been healing here. And from Daskalos, I thought my job as a healer was to clean the chakras from karma, from elementals. And for 22 years or 24 years, I developed techniques, or I was given techniques, where we lay our hands on the chakras, go into passivity, the mercy would flow in, and then clean away family karma, personal karma, da 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 da. And I was totally ignorant as a healer to the glandular system and to the lymph system and to other systems.
I got you.
First of all, I can tell you that I am personally grateful to this whole COVID thing because the velocity of my lifestyle before COVID was out of control. I mean, I had a group of people going through Egypt in March of 2022. We were in the middle of a 2-week trip through Egypt when COVID hit Egypt, you know, and it was really nice because we were completely alone at some of the temples because all the tourists left. You know, that's one of the nicest times to travel is during COVID because all the temples are empty, which they never are. You know,
that's why I travel at that time too, a lot.
I mean, I was in the old city of Ephesus, and I was there with like 2 other people, which you've never experienced. Doesn't matter. So, and then I came back to Germany, and everything shut down. You know, so I couldn't go to Denmark to teach. I couldn't go to Austria to teach. Here at my room here, where I teach healing and everything, there was one time where one person could come. One person could come as long as they were vaccinated. One person. So I started teaching online. You know, which I'm not a big fan of. I think teaching has to be taking place in person. You know, I mean, I saw Daskalos teach for 6 years, and that went deeply into me. Even now, even though I edited all the books from Daskalos, I don't read them because reading is one thing, but to see somebody heal is another thing. And you know, I'm not saying I'm like Daskalos, but I know that you have to learn healing from somebody who shows you how to heal with their hands in person. Doesn't matter. So now my life has slowed way down, and for that I'm grateful because it allowed me to develop a script for the Gospel of Philip to do a book on tapes. We did it over a course of 6 months with a friend of mine, Bernard, who plays Jesus in the film, and we compared then over 6 months the best Coptic translation. We only have it in Coptic, the best German translation and the best English translation over 6 months. And that allowed me to go so deeply into the Gospel of Philip, which I would never normally I would never have the time. And then because of COVID, I wanted to go into vaccine damage from the COVID vaccine, what that does to the glands, like the adrenal glands. And then I said, well, I shouldn't stop there. I should actually see what's going on with childhood vaccination program. Because childhood vaccination program, if you believe in the CDC or STIKO here, is out of control. It's out of control. I mean, a 2-week-old child will get a vaccine with 6 different viruses in it. 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah. Can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
I think there is no excuse for people right now to be ignorant. You know, you have internet, you have children, you have you can put 1 + 1, it's 2 = 2, right?
Yeah.
So there is like even metaverse, you know, you can go inside the body virtually, see liver, I don't know, lungs, whatever. You can even imagine the viruses, how it works. All you need, like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, you know, and people don't want to do that. They listen some people with, I don't know.
Stay in your peace. Now you're being critical of people.
No, I'm just like everything in your hand and you don't use it. You know, you don't have to be spiritual. You just have to be, you know, like
Germany, where this obedience is out of control. You know, you think Germans are intellectual or at least rational? They're not. Nothing against.
But at least they have clean houses. I've been in Berlin and McDonald's one day, like long time ago. They have a spare minute. They start to clean everything. You know, compared to United States, nobody care about anything. So there is a plus and minus, no?
I know, and the Germans they walk. Yeah. Wait, Alex, we have to see if somebody else has.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you.
Somebody else has a question? Yeah, hi.
Grüß dich from Vancouver.
But bitte English.
Guten Abend nach Deutschland.
Please English.
Paul, ich habe zwei Fragen und ich habe die zwei Fragen in die Chat.
Kannst du das bitte auf Englisch sagen? Well, the andere, die sprechen English. And your English is better than your German, I know that.
I wrote two questions in the chat.
Yeah, I'll look at them.
And the first one was, could you elaborate a little bit on the 6th hour on the 6th day? And could we incorporate that in our own exercises, like prayers and the exercise that we do from you?
John is a universal consciousness. I'm trying to read your question. John is an absolutely universal consciousness. And when you call on John, he will come to you, not just to me, you know.
No, that's not me. No, under Nevenka.
I know, I'm telling you that John will come to you and answer your questions.
Okay.
You can have a hotline to John and to Daskalos. What is your other question? I'm trying to read it.
My comment about the Masters of the Emissaries. I read the book. You mentioned it some time ago.
Yeah.
And I read it. He's presenting the problem, which is, I agree with him, but he's not presenting a solution to the problem.
And I am. I tell you, it's spiritual healing. Better spiritual healing than a stroke.
I agree with you.
You know what? St. Augustine said in 1500, he said, "Dear God, make me celibate, but not yet. Not for the grace of God, there goes I." I don't, you know, Daskalos needed a stroke to be freed from this belief system. I know it. I was there. I was there on the day he had the stroke. I carried him down to the ambulance on a blanket, and you know, he needed it. And so we don't need that anymore. You know, McGilchrist, that book is enormous, so it only goes into the left hemisphere.
Correct.
Still, correct. That's why I don't read the book, but if you watch the videos of him on YouTube, they're incredible. And so he doesn't have a solution, but he points out the problem perfectly. And I'm telling you, I have a solution. My solution is spiritual healing.
Welcome to the family. Yeah. Thank you for.
Yeah.
Last one, third one. Yeah. The last book of the Testament. I forgot the title of it.
The Book of Revelation.
Yes.
Book of the Apocalypse.
I understood it the more I have been reading, and I have been reading it diligently. It's on a very personal level.
That's what we do on the island of Patmos, and that's what we're doing in September, is we experience the Book of the Apocalypse as a healing technique, because the Book of the Apocalypse is built up out of 7 times 7. And that's 49. And Daskalos said that each one of us exists in a number of the 49 planes. That's why it is totally on the inner level. Totally.
So for us who are blessed to have met you,
Thank you.
and are deeply imbued into this work,
Please
we would suggest.
tell my wife that.
I'll let you know if I ever meet her.
She doesn't feel so blessed to have met me sometimes. Yeah. Thank you.
That happens to all of us. Just brush it up.
See you next weekend.
Yes, next weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
Somebody just entered the chat. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Question. Please say your name. Yeah, hi. You have to speak a little louder. Well, I can't. Can you turn up your mic or speak louder, closer to the mic?
Okay. Can you hear my voice?
Now I hear you.
Can
Yeah,
you hear?
I hear you.
Can you hear my voice? My name is Noriko, Tokyo, Japan, and Instagram. The name of also.
Your mic, your
Okay.
is breaking up. Do you hear her? The other people hear her? It's breaking up all the time. So I do hear you, but then there's a static. There's a static to your, maybe from your microphone. Maybe you could write your question, because I'm trying to stay really focused to hear it.
Oh, okay.
Breaking up.
Can you hear my voice?
Yeah, I hear you, but it's still breaking up.
Can you hear my voice?
Now it's better.
Can you hear?
Yeah,
Can you hear my voice?
I hear your voice.
Can you hear?
Yeah, I hear.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
I have one question
Good.
about color. When I take
When will Daskus incarnate? Is that your question?
okay.
Is
There I have the hypnotherapy, okay? Hypnotherapy, like past life language. Past life language. Okay, I'm going to write a message.
I'm really, really sorry, but I can't follow the whole question. Did anybody else? If you want, you got this invitation somehow, you can write me an email and then I'll answer you. But maybe. I'm sorry, I think technically on your side is not cooperating. There's some interference. It's pretty strong. We have. I'm sorry.
Okay, can I talk with you? I can hear my voice.
I hear your voice, but I hear your voice, but it keeps breaking up. And it's almost impossible to piece together what you're trying to say. I would love to understand what you're trying to ask, but I just don't get it. I don't even get the gist. So I think we have to move on. Does anybody else have a question? I know you have a question, but it's not working out between us right now because somehow the technology on your end is blocking you from coming through clear enough. It's now even getting worse. What I suggest to you, somehow you got this invitation, probably through email or through Facebook. Can you write me your question? And I'll get back to you. I promise I will. What I'm trying to figure out what your name is even. Tokyo entered the. Oh. Mark. Yeah. Alex, go ahead. Go ahead and shoot.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I've been studying Daskalos teaching like for a very long time, and most of the time by books and tapes and recording. And every day I'm listening, I come up with some kind of questions, like all type of questions, and I need the answer. Can we do like a session or something that I don't know? I can give you like multiple choices, the answer. You know, don't take your like, is this? You understand what I'm saying?
You know, tell you, first of all, I don't really have time for private teachings because I'm actually.
I don't want you to teach anything. I want you to just give me answer. Yes, no, maybe. Yes, no, maybe. Like that.
I'll tell you one thing about Daskalos.
Yeah.
Daskalos always said yes.
Okay.
Do you know how frustrating it is? So Daskalos wants to write a book, and I have to type it in, right? Like the parables or the esoteric teaching, the symbol of life. So my job is to type it in. And when you type it in, you want to correct it. That's part of your job as a native English speaker, because I was once a native English speaker, by the way. And so you write something out to Daskalos, you print it out, you go to him and say, Daskalos, can I read this to you to see if it's correct? And he would always say yes, always say yes. And then you had no idea if it was 5% correct or 95% correct. No idea. He would never say no. And this is actually why, you know, if you ever want to incarnate to Daskalos, don't incarnate as his child. Because I don't know how many of you have children, but children need to hear no more often than they need to hear yes. Children want to learn borders. And as you know, Daskalos' wife died when his two daughters were very young, 8 and 12. And Daskalos always said yes. Now, if you have a father who always says yes and never corrects you, whatever. I'm not saying anything. It's just, you know. So Daskalos' teachings are beautiful. They're fantastic. They're very helpful and they're very useful, especially his teachings on elementals and on the bodies. But, you know, you just have to ask for guidance, and then Daskalos will be there. Daskalos has reincarnated again.
Okay.
Reincarnated again, but he's not working here, and but he's accessible as a spirit guide. Daskalos always said, when I pass over, you know, I'll come to any of you who ask me, and he does. He shows up here all the time in the treatment room.
I see him sometimes in my dreams, like smiling.
Then ask him questions.
Yeah, but he doesn't want to say anything. He's just smiling, you know, like.
Daskalos.
Yeah.
It's the Greek method. You ask a question, and you get a rhetorical answer.
Yeah. Okay. And I understand. But this was my first time. Okay.
That's just fine. That's fine.
First time I tried to ask you a question, like about questions. So that's probably gonna be a second time. We'll wait. Thank you.
You're welcome, man.
Yeah.
Tanya. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Yeah.
Can you hear my voice?
Now I hear it very clearly.
Okay. Thank you. Hi. My name is Noriko Hishinuma in Tokyo, Japan, and I'm Instagrammer. As the name is Oracle for Marco in Tokyo. Like spiritual world in Tokyo.
Yeah,
I have one question.
please.
During I taking the hypnotherapy, like the past life regression, suddenly dust colors appear in my subconscious, and he began to teach the chakra therapy. He like this first, makes around my hand like this. Like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And then in the between the around my hands,
Beautiful.
making the emerald green color light bulb.
Yeah, beautiful.
Green color, like the brilliant,
Emerald green color is
like,
color.
like brilliant color, like a light bulb. And then I could hear my mom's body because my mom has a stomach cancer. And the scholars said to me, moving the light emerald green ball into my mom's solar plexus chakra into the slowly.
Yeah.
And then my mom's chakra absorbed the green colored ball. And then the scholar said, pulling up my mom's cells. My mom has the stomach cancer, and the scholars picked the carcinogen cancer from my mom.
Beautiful.
And then he told me like how to treatment the upper dimensions. How do you say that? My mom's body in the 3 dimension, but the scholars said to me to bring up the higher dimensions and bring up the carcinogenous cells from my mom.
Nice.
And he said expanding the cell. And then he tried to treatment like the brilliant color, and then condensed and returned to the 3 dimensions to my mom's stomach. And this means the scholar said dematerialization, and then after that materialization. This is the scholar's lesson. So my question is, what does mean the green colors? Like
I'll tell you.
from green colors, the green colors,
Yeah.
the making the ball.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, because it's very, very beautiful. And it also shows you that dust bliss is there for all of us. The emerald green color, dust bliss said, is a combination of the Christ, which is the yellow light, together with Gabriel, which is the sky blue light. And when they come together, they create the emerald green color. And dust bliss, that as this world formed 4.6 billion years ago, it was surrounded by the emerald green color, and all life was nurtured by the emerald green color. And he said he says probably the strongest healing color that there is the emerald green color. So you knew that intuitively. It's beautiful.
No, I see. I understand. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, take care and keep working. Keep healing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Okay.
Okay. I wanted to take time to do an exercise, but maybe we should just take a short 5-minute break. Do you folks still have time to just do a simple exercise? Yeah. So why don't we take just a short break to go to the bathroom? 10-minute break, and then get together at 10 past the hour. Okay. Okay, so let's start now. And we're going to end the session with this meditation. It's a very simple meditation to do, but it's drawn directly from the Christ. In Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew 5:5, is known as the Sermon on the Mount. And in the Sermon on the Mount, Christ delivers the Beatitudes. And the Beatitudes are beautiful. There are 8 of them in that form. And what's nice about the Beatitudes is what they contain is a perfect balance between the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And my personal belief is that the new paradigm that we're entering now in the next 11 years or so are going to be built up on the Beatitudes. So let us relax now where we are. It doesn't matter where we are, if we're in a high rise or in a home. And our feet are connected to the floor. And allow your feet to go through the floor deep down into the earth, the Mother Earth, Gaia. Gaia is a part of the creative force of creation. And that means Gaia is rooted in the divine feminine. And everything that flows from the divine feminine is full with original peace, original trust, joy, and love. And now feel how the Mother Earth bathes your feet in love, trust, joy, and peace. She comes into your feet, the soles of your feet, through the ankles, moves up into the lower legs, through the knees, and into the thigh bones. This beautiful gifts of the Mother Earth of joy, peace, trust, and love flows now into the root chakra and into the reproductive organs. And if there's any stress in the root chakra or reproductive organs, feel them being washed away by love and joy and trust and peace. And this continues to bathe the body into the Hara chakra, the sacral chakra, deep into the solar plexus and the abdomen. But all the nerves of the solar plexus, all the glands, all the lymphs are fully bathed in love and peace and trust and joy. Thanks to the Mother Earth, Gaia. That moves up through the diaphragm and into the lungs. And not only the lungs, but the heart as the organ and as a chakra are fully bathed now in joy, peace, love, and trust. That washes away any fear or sadness or life fatigue. We're allowed to breathe much more relaxed, much more fully. These qualities from the Mother Earth flow into the thymus gland and into the thyroid gland, and gently up into the throat chakra. The throat chakra during a paradigm shift goes through a lot of struggles because it wants to control everything. And as we see, there's very little we can control right now. So feel your throat chakra being fully bathed in peace and especially trust and joy and love. And it relaxes the throat chakra, and that goes right into the lower jaw and into the thyroid gland. And feel your shoulders being freely relaxed, as if a great weight is being removed from your shoulders, a weight that maybe you've been carrying for decades. And these beautiful presence from the Mother Earth move up into the mouth and into the gums and into the teeth and up into the nasal passages, moving gently into the sinuses. And from the sinuses, it starts to flow into the brain and continues up to move up into the eyes, and all the muscles in the forehead go into a deep state of relaxation. Feel your amygdala and your thalamus and your hypothalamus and your prefrontal cortex fully bathed in joy, peace, love, and trust. Slowly, this presence from the Mother Earth move gently into the left and right hemisphere of the brain, bringing them softly together in harmony and exchange. Allow yourselves there to be spontaneously healed yet and now. And now let's call on the Divine Father to manifest in the gold yellow light in the left hand, above the left hemisphere of the brain. And call on the Divine Mother to manifest in the snow white light above the right hemisphere of the brain. And now call on the Great Mother, the Divine Mother, to flow into you through the right hemisphere of the brain, cross over the third eye, move down over the left shoulder, through the left lung, through the spleen, and gently down into the left testicle or left fallopian tubes. And again, she comes in and fills the left side of the body with this beautiful snow white light. And now call on the Christ, the Great Father energy and the golden light to come into the left hemisphere, cross over the third eye, and move gently down through the right shoulder, through the right lung, through the liver, through the gall bladder, and gently into the right testicle, the right fallopian tube, ovary. And again, he comes in and blesses the right side of the body with the golden light. It's like you're standing in the arms of the divine parents now, the great motherly energy and the great fatherly energy. The left side of the body is filled with the snow white light, and the right side of the body filled with the golden color of the Christ. And your hands and your arms are also filled with this color. Now bring your hands down and place them over your root chakra, gently over the root chakra, one on top of the other. The order is not important. And call on the Divine Mother and Father to flow into your root chakra and pray the Beatitude, blessed are the poor in spirit, but theirs is the kingdom of heavens. 3 times. Blessed are the poor in spirit, but theirs is the kingdom of heavens. Blessed are the poor in spirit, but theirs is the kingdom of heavens. And allow the Divine Father and Mother to bring that beautiful prayer, mantra, deeply into your root chakra now. Transforming your root chakra. Preparing it for a new time. If you experience some sort of discomfort for a short time, consider that to be a release, a spontaneous release of energy that you no longer need. As this beatitude starts to fill up your root chakra. And humility, free of pain, free of suffering, free of hurt, free of damage. And then gently remove your hands, keep them oriented towards the heavens. Keep both palms facing upwards, that the Divine Father flows into the right hand, even more, and Divine Mother into the left hand. Now bring these over and place them on the sacral chakra, or the Hara chakra, as I prefer to say. This is a place where we bring a large part of our childhood. We'll talk about how an inner child might be in us suffering. And that would be in the Hara chakra. And now let us pray. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Let that sink in now. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Allow that beautiful mantra to pour deeply into your heart chakra as comfort. And slowly remove your hands, keeping them focused upwards, still receiving the beautiful love from the Father and the Mother, and golden light and snow white light. And place them gently on the solar plexus now. And blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And gently remove the hands and keep them focused upwards, receiving. And surrender, service. Bring them together on the heart chakra. Daskalus used to bring his thumbs together, interlock them like this, And spread the fingers out to create a sun and place it on the heart. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God everywhere. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Then remove the hands gently, oriented towards the heavens. Now we can either place our hands around the throat like this, or cup them together and just let them hang on the throat chakra. Blessed are those who thirst and hunger after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are those who thirst and hunger after righteousness, fairness, for they shall be filled. And blessed are those who thirst and hunger after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Release the hands slowly. Keep them at this level. We lay our palms gently on the temples like this. That between our hands is the third eye. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. And blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. And blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Hands. Keep them at the level. And what we can do is now we can treat the crown chakra, but what we're going to do is at the same time treat the two hemispheres of the brain. So we lay the left hand on the left hemisphere of the brain and the right hand on the right hemisphere, and bring our fingertips together to form sort of the point. And that point is where the crown chakra is, like this. So all 3 points will be treated with this beautiful mantra, the crown chakra and both hemispheres of the brain. And blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Now we put our hands together again over the heart chakra to form the sun. And we ask the Divine Mother and Divine Father to bring us in absolute harmony with heaven and earth. and to prepare us and to already bring us into the new paradigm. Each day a little bit more, built up on the beautiful Beatitudes given by the Christ 2,000 years ago, as he stood on a hillside overlooking the Sea of Galilee. Now is the time indeed to harvest the Beatitudes. And in effect, we are the Beatitudes. And your souls are filled with the Beatitudes. If you do that once a day, and you call on the Christ and the Great Mother to be with you, then you will stay in peace and trust and hope. Okay, folks, I want to thank you for taking part today. Just as a little bit of an advertisement, next weekend, I'm going to do a two-day workshop in the afternoon, this time of day for people in America, where we look at the 7 miracles of the Gospel of John, and how they relate to the chakras. The first miracle is the marriage at Cana. It takes place for the root chakra. The second miracle is the healing from the nobleman. The healing from somebody just entered the healing from the nobleman child. The third is the solar plexus. It's the healing from the paralyzed man. The fourth is the heart chakra, and that's the multiplication of the fish and the bread. The sixth is the he walks on water. That's for the throat chakra. The seventh is the healing of the blind man in Jerusalem. And the last one is bringing back Lazarus back to life and to love. And I'll be teaching that. We'll be going into each one of the miracles, what that means. And I'll also show on Sunday afternoon how you can do that as a self-healing technique, and also as a hands-on treatment. And I've been working with the Gospel of John for over 25 years. And as I did this in German last weekend, I was shocked by what I hadn't seen. So if you have time, then I'll be here also on Zoom and also here in person to give this 2-day workshop in the afternoon in Central European time. And also for the Patmos trip in September, end of September, nice time to be in Patmos because it's not too hot and Patmos is empty. There are some places remaining. And then about 2 weeks later, we're going to bring a week in Sanliufra in Turkey, Anatolia, visiting Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, and the other one, the birthplace of Abraham, the first university city in the world, the grave of Job, and the largest mosaic museum in the world. And that's in the middle of October. If you have time and have money and you want to take part, then I'd be glad to see you in one land or the other, or next weekend. Okay, that was enough for my advertisement. Everybody take care and stay healthy, stay peaceful, stay well. And
Okay.